I wanted to make a video talking more in depth about the 5-second sci-fi composition I posted last week. If you don't know, there's a channel called Film Riot. They've been around for forever, and they show tutorials and do filmmaking tricks, and they have competitions every once in a while. And this time they had a competition where you just put a sci-fi vehicle into your footage, or even just a still frame, and it was a chance to win. And I thought, that's a good opportunity for me to practice some of the 3D work that I've been doing and trying to learn in Blender. So I went out and I bought a CG model on CG Trader of a little drone and started working with it in Blender. And in 2 days, I took that drone, animated it, rendered it, and comped it into a project, and then did some sound design and uploaded the 5-second clip that is on my channel. If you haven't seen the clip, you can go watch it, but since it's only 5 seconds, I'll just probably put it in here, because after submitting it to the contest, I was looking at it and I was like, hold on, something's not right. And my lighting was way off. I realized that in Blender, suns are directional, but when you place them, they're pointing straight down. And I thought the way that you change it is like with any other point light, you just move it where you want it to be coming from. And I had done that and it didn't do anything. So my shadows are projecting straight down in the one that's on my channel and is my entry. So I wanted to fix that just so that I have a proper version. So I started working on that and ended up getting the shadows right and actually moving a lot of things around to make it align perfectly. As I was doing that, I realized that in my After Effects comp, the sequence of the image sequence that I pulled in for the drone was set to 30 frames per second, which is not correct. I exported it in 24 frames per second. So I fixed that and played it back, and it extended a little bit. I didn't extend the clip any. It just cuts off sooner than the actual render does, because I didn't want to have to deal with rearranging things. But then I did have to go in and adjust the sounds that I'd put all of my audio to match the new timing of everything. So I did that, and here's the updated version. It's just shadows. There's shadows, and it's timed properly, but that's about it.
Authorizing. Denied.
After doing this project, I just felt really good about it. It's 5 seconds long. It doesn't have any story. It's not difficult. I was able to do it in 2 days, and yet I'm really proud of how it turned out. And so upon looking at that and thinking about it, I realized this is what this channel has always been about, is a place for me to post the stuff that I'm learning. And I keep trying to learn by making full films. But I could just get a lot out of consistently making better and better, like short snippets, practice projects. So what I'm considering doing, and I haven't decided for sure, but I'm pretty certain I'm going to try it at least for a little while and see how it works. I've decided to start doing practice projects of that style where they don't have to have a plot, they don't have to be any specific length, where I do some sort of CG or 3D item, some sort of composition, and then post it on my channel every other week. So on the weekend, every other week, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I work on a short, non-specific 3D/VFX project of varying styles and difficulties and storyline, and just upload them to my channel. And then maybe afterwards I can come back and show you guys how I did it. Like in this video, I'm hoping to go in and record in Blender to show you just kind of the basic setup of what I did, and how I pieced that thing together, and then how I fixed it when I realized that the shadows were wrong. So, you know, that's kind of what this channel is about, is learning and seeing my growth as I go. And so I'm realizing it doesn't have to be a story. It doesn't have to be a short. It can just be a random composition, a random VFX shot, completely out of context, that just helped me learn different techniques so that I can apply those to when I do have a short film that needs something in that vein. And since it turned out so well, I'm gonna start doing that. So look forward to bi-weekly, which is every other, not twice a week, bi-weekly, every other week VFX compositions right here on this channel of varying lengths. And then if I feel up to it / have time, on the off weeks, I'll make a video about how I did it and what I learned from it, like this one. So stay tuned if you think that sounds interesting. So for my VFX shot, I decided to just look through some clips I had taken on my Blackmagic camera that were already reasonably easy for a VFX comp. So I found this shot of me walking across a parking lot and then turning around and coming back late at night that I thought was interesting but easy. I chose one that was locked off on a tripod, so I didn't have to do any tracking, because tracking has been a nightmare for me in Blender. I'm still trying to figure that out, but I figured I should start small. So took that clip into Blender, just made sure that I prefetched my scene and then loaded it as the background for my camera. Then I placed my camera in approximately where I thought it lined up with the grid. And then after doing that, I added a plane and aligned it with the ground so that it took the spot of the ground in my comp. Did the same with the walls, and then I put a box for where there's a dumpster surrounded by a little stone area. So then I just made sure that my renderer was set to cycles, and then I went into the object panel for those items and set them to be shadow catchers, which means that render doesn't recognize them as objects to be rendered, but will render shadows from other objects in the scene as if they had landed on an object there. So you don't see it in the shot, but if there's a shadow on it, you see the shadow. So that's what that does. And I set that, and basically that was it for setting up that shot. Later, when I had to go in and fix things, I realized things were not set up really well. So I ended up moving them around a bunch, but I won't go into detail about that. Basically, I just had to make sure that everything was lined up to match perfectly in the viewport of my camera, what I saw in the background as well. So then I went out and I bought this $5 drone on CG Trader. Came with all the textures, and I just pulled it into Blender, assigned all the textures, and then started animating. I did my biggest moves first, so I picked where the drone was going to go, and had it come down, and then turn and come down the other direction. And then after that, I went in and did the small animations, like having the wings on the drone turn forward when it starts moving forward, and then turn back to stop it, and then flatten out. And then when it turns, they turn the direction to pull it, flatten out, turn forward to pull it, and then flatten as it comes down. Those little things. And at the very end, I made the gun on the front of the drone go down. I could not get things like the rotors and the gun, which is supposed to rotate. I was having trouble with that animation. I'm not very good with animation yet. It's probably something I was doing, but I was having a lot of trouble. The things that people said would work in Blender forums were not working. It would speed ramp and then slow down over time instead of continually spinning. So I don't know what was wrong with that. It might have been the model, it might have been me, it might have been Blender. I have no idea. But I kind of did my best and then gave up because you're not going to see it anyway. Then I rendered it out. Figuring out render settings was confusing for a while, but there are a lot of videos about it, and I don't really know what I'm doing, so I'm not going to talk much about that. I did a lot of different ones. For me, the fastest, even with my GPU, was just 64 by 64. And I set my bounce lighting to be high because I wanted it to be as close to realistic as possible. And I know that's not necessarily always the best, but that's what I did. So, so then after that, I pulled the PNG sequence that was exported from Blender into After Effects and just overlaid it on my footage, made sure it lined up properly, and added some noise to make it match with the noise from the camera, because renders often have a lot less noise than video footage. So I took it in some noise and I added a little bit of a wiggle on it that just stuck Well, first time I just put a wiggle that moved it around because there was no real shadow showing, so it didn't really look that weird that it moved around a lot. And it made it look more realistic that it was not just going here and then down. It was actually floating around and like hovering and then coming down. Then I believe that's basically all I did in After Effects. I did a few other things here and there, and I'm not remembering off the top of my head, and I'm not looking at it right now. But they weren't really important. They were really, things like noise and just brightness and saturation, just to make sure it matches and looks good. And then I exported it as an H.264 and brought it into Premiere and worked on it in there, added sound design, and I was like, something's wrong. So I went back into After Effects and took the whole thing and pre-comped it, and then on top of that pre-comp added a wiggle that moved the whole thing so that the camera wasn't just sitting still. And that's what I ended up uploading to the channel that you can go watch. Then after that, I went back and looked at the footage and realized that my shadow is straight down, which does not match the shadows in the shot at all. And there should be a shadow following along the wall. So I went back into Blender, I figured out where my sun was, moved it so where I could see it, and then started rotating it to figure out how to get it there. So I rotated it so that it matched the general direction of a pole in the shot, lined it up so that it looked like it was casting in the right direction, and then I lowered the sun's power so that it's not a sharp shadow but a lot softer to match the ones in the shot. Then I exported that out and brought it into After Effects and just applied everything that I had applied to the other one, which is where the wiggle comes in. The wiggle on the drone wiggled in all directions. So a wiggle command just kind of nudges the thing over in all directions randomly a certain number of times per frame, which was causing the shadow to move above and behind an object that it was projecting on, which did not look realistic. There was a sharp line where the shadow cuts on an object that's right there. And so if it moves back a bit, it looks like the shadow's just floating on nothing and really breaks the illusion that it's a real shadow. So I ended up going in and setting the wiggle to just wiggle on the Y. Or it may have been X. I don't know which one's X and which one's Y in After Effects. It should be Y, but I don't know. Every program is different. If you work in 3D, you know that sometimes it's Y and sometimes it's Z. It's not a 3D layer, so I was very confused. But I got it, and it just goes up and down. It doesn't wiggle back and forth. It doesn't look quite as good, but with the shadow, I didn't want to have to deal with doing separate wiggles for each and lining them up and masking. So I just did up and down and exported that, readjusted all my sound design, and that's what I have here, and you can watch that now.
Authorizing. Denied.
And see what it looks like with the proper shadows. So yeah, and I'm really proud of the way this shot turned out, both of them, even without the shadows. I'm really happy with the way it looks. I mean, even though it's only 5 seconds and there's no story, I feel like I learned a lot from this project. I got a lot out of just sitting down and doing a project that I can do. It's at the level that I understand. Every project I've done, I've been trying to track something. And it's like, I don't have that yet. I need to do everything else and get really good at it before I start trying to do like tracking and whatnot for a project. I need to do something I can do without being super frustrated, to learn the basics of this whole process before I start trying to do all of the other stuff. I've also realized that it is really easy to track things in After Effects. And so for the most part, if I can get a plugin like Element 3D that allows you to take 3 items into After Effects, I can do some of that tracking in After Effects for certain shots and do my 3D in there, which I don't want to have to pay for that. But if I decide that I need to do a tracking shot and Blender's just not cutting it for me and I can't get it to work, I might do that just because it's super, super easy to use. So that's kind of how this shot was made. That's kind of my thought process. Now that it's done, I'm really happy with it. And I think that it would be good for me to do more of these types of projects where I take a VFX shot that I know I can complete without getting super frustrated or taking way too much time. and do one of those every other week as just a practice. It doesn't have to be story based. It doesn't have to be a specific amount of time. It can be super short or it can be long if I have something I want to do that's long. As long as it's something I can do in 2 or 3 days, get it done, get it out, make it, and then have all of that knowledge from all of the projects combined and just build upon what I know until I'm at a point where I feel like I can tackle the next step of whatever it is, whether that's tracking or better animation, whatever it is. So that's kind of what this project has been, and I'm super, super happy with it. I hope you like it. And if you're interested in seeing my other projects that I'm going to be doing every other week, consider subscribing to see those, and I'll see you next time.